Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever, wherever you're tuning in from. We have marketers from all over the world tuning into this web clinic right now. A very hot topic. Dr. McLaughlin was very saddened by the fact that he couldn't make this webinar, but he asked me to come into the studio today and walk you through probably one of the more interesting case studies that we've had in a very long time. It's the beginning of 2014. We're going to start with an experiment around the topic of mobile design, responsive design. We get questions about mobile all the time. It's like the hot topic today. I mean, when people are, if you ask people what is the number one thing impacting marketers today, it's the shift from desktop to mobile. And so a lot of times we get questions around how important is it for us to design our pages so that they show properly or look a specific way for mobile design. And so that's what we're being looking at today. I've got some awesome news. We have a series of experiments to actually begin answering that question for you. And honestly, that's what we do here at Marketing Experiments. I don't know, for some of you, this is your first web clinic. Some of you have been on here a lot of times. Thanks for coming back. Happy New Year. Glad to have you. But this is your first time. One thing that we want to do here, the big aim of these web clinics is not simply just to give you some rules to follow. That's not, honestly, we're tired of rules. We're tired of people telling us, hey, do this or do that. This webinar series exists to really ask the question, okay, so yeah, we hear someone say, do responsive design. We hear someone say, it really doesn't matter. What we want to do is we want to say what really works. We want to test it. We're not satisfied with just opinions of people. And I tell you what, I have been to company after company, and I can't tell you how many different opinions there are about mobile. Bottom line, we're going to let the customer tell us through testing. And so that's what we've done today. We have an experiment today. Our desire here is just to kind of walk you through that experiment. Responsive design tested, what a recent experiment reveals about the potential ROI of mobile design. I want to encourage you to interact with us. Dan was mentioning you have a tool in GoToWebinar right now that allows you to ask us questions. It allows you to give us feedback and comments. And honestly, this isn't hopefully a one-way dialogue. Okay, we want you to impact our research agenda just as much as we're talking about it. So as we're talking, as you see opportunities or as you have questions or things you might even want us to test in the future, we want to hear from you. Interact with us that way. Also, if you'd like to interact with us on Twitter, that's a great way many of our audience members interact with us. I mean, it's kind of a way to not only interact privately, but to interact in a group. You guys know what Twitter is, but just want to make that available to you. Now use #WebClinic. Like Dan said, my name is Austin McCraw. I'm going to be kind of the main moderator for this conversation today. I have John Powell with me, who is very, very familiar with this experiment. He's going to be up here walking us through some key pieces. It's not a simple answer today, guys. The test was pretty surprising to me, and I think it'll be surprising to you. And so we're going to be looking at that today with both me and John. So hang on, guys, okay? So the first question I want to ask, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what responsive design is. I assume that the majority of you know, but just in case you don't, what is responsive design? Most of you have experienced responsive design before, but basically what responsive design is, normally before the invention of mobile, you had kind of one type of coding system, and basically the way a web page displayed on a browser on a desktop was directly brought over into the mobile space. No sizing differences, no scaling differences. You basically got the same page on the mobile device. Now, what responsive design allows you to do, it allows you to take that code and tweak it in such a way that you say, hey, within a certain perimeter, within a certain window pixel width, we want you to display this design rather than this other design. So this allows you to kind of, in some sense, factor for the change in the width of the page. So you don't have potentially you're trying not to have, and I'll show you, here's a little example. You're trying to have less things getting cut off. You're trying to replicate the experience that people have on the desktop as much as possible on the mobile design. Now, intuitively, beyond the fact that this is an interesting topic, but beyond the fact that this is just a novel thing that we can add to our mobile designs, guys, there is some strategy here. Intuitively, you would consider that this would be an effective strategy. And why? Well, here's why. Here's why at Marketing Experiments we would suggest that responsive design, we would hypothesize that responsive design actually might help aid the conversion process. Many of you are familiar with our conversion heuristic. If you're not, it's that C equals 4M plus 3V plus 2I minus F minus 2A. What you see on the screen right now, this is a conversion heuristic. This is not a mathematical equation. It's a heuristic to help us, guide us in the way we approach our messaging on our web pages. Okay? I don't have time to go through each of these elements. We have an entire course on this. I'm not selling the course. I'm just letting you know about it. If you want to take it, you can take it. Many of you on the line have already taken it. And if you have taken it, you're probably already familiar with what aspect of that heuristic that is most likely impacted by responsive design. It is the F. It is friction. It is the effort that is required, the perceived effort required in completing the conversion process. That's what friction is get to. And it is impacted by two things, length and difficulty. How long is a process? And honestly, many of you, whether you've taken our courses or not, have probably heard of the term friction. You're probably familiar with the term friction. You probably heard it used in marketing context before, not just the physics context, but a marketing context. And we tend to think of things like long pages, processes with like 20 steps, many form fields that you have to fill out. That's what we think of when we think of friction. And that is a part of friction. That is the length part of friction. But there's also the difficulty side of friction. We call it actually the silent killer of conversion because it's things like equally weighted calls to action. It's like poorly designed iPath. Oftentimes multimedia can have a major impact in terms of difficulty. This is what we mean when we term by friction. And the reason why responsive design has come about is an effort to reduce friction. Because when you're given a page that was designed for 1200, 1600 width pixel, and you're trying to read that on a screen size that's much smaller, it actually gets difficult. It gets challenging. Oftentimes it takes longer because you're having to scroll to the side, you're having to scroll to the bottom. And so I know you guys know what responsive design is, okay? And I know some of you are thinking, okay, get to the test, get to the test. We're gonna get to the test, it's coming. But I want you to connect this to the underlying psychological issue. So we might intuit that responsive design will have a good effect. It'll make things easier, but this is what we're connecting to. We're connecting it to psychological friction in the conversion process. And ultimately, our question today, the question of the researchers here at Marketing Experiments is not, will responsive design increase conversion? Our hypothesis is, will it reduce friction? Will it make things easier? Will it make things will it reduce the perceived effort on the part of the customer? I hope that makes sense. I've kind of gone over that quickly. If you have any more questions related to friction or how it applies to responsive design, we have a team standing by to help you with that. Feel free to submit your questions that way. Also, again, like I said, we fleshed this out in more detail in our course material, but I just wanted to connect, first off, what is responsive design, and then what is it impacting in the psychological process? So, here's the question, and here's the question I have for you. How much do you think responsive design impacts friction? So I'm going to put you in the seat of the scientist for a moment. Do you think responsive design has a great impact on friction? Will it make the process easier, or will it make the process, well, it doesn't really impact the process? Is it going to make it simple or not? I see some responses coming in. Yes, easier. Yes, it'll lower the friction. Simpler. I see one not. This is the iconoclast in the group there. All right, good. Good. So yes, a lot of you guys are in agreement that this is perhaps the advantage of responsive design. That makes it simple or gets to the point. And so that was what we were testing today. We will find out in a moment. So, but first, let me just go ahead and run you through the experimentation. I'm going to give you an overall picture, and then we're going to come through and break it down in kind of a three-step process. So here's the group we're working with. All right, it's a news media organization trying to determine whether they should invest in responsive mobile design or not. And that's a question that we often all have, right? I'm sure many of you on the line are familiar with that question. And honestly, let me just say this. The new technology, the new techniques, the new tips oftentimes get the most budget because they're the hottest item. You know, for a while, it was social media. We got to invest in social media. And we're getting we got to invest in responsive design. And so we have this group here that's wondering, is it actually worth the investment? Yeah, we know about friction. Yeah, we know about friction, but we want to test it before we actually put the investment in there. So that's what we're going to do here. To significantly increase the number of signups, that was their overall goal. So they're trying to get people to do a free trial. And the research question here is, which design will generate the highest rate of free trial signups? Will it be the responsive design, or will it be the unresponsive design? And I want you to know this. Responsive design doesn't just impact the mobile environment. It impacts everything. It impacts the desktop environment, it impacts the tablet environment, and it impacts the mobile phone environment. So we're going to look at each of those stages at this point. So here you go. Here's the control. Here's the page you see right now, right in front of you. It's a simple subscription form page. You have been selected to receive a free unlimited access to this group for the next 2 weeks. And all you got to do is put your name and your email and potentially sign up for 2 weeks now. So this is the page, and this is the original tablet. Now this is the tablet version. This is a wider screen, but you can still see here that with the unresponsive design, we lose the image and we're losing part of the headline text. So in theory, the visitor is having to do some scrolling to make sense of the headline. Okay, so there's the before of the unresponsive. Let's look at what it looks like on a mobile device. Ooh, even more difficult here, right? So now we have even more of the headline cut off. We're having to do more scrolling. The page isn't designed to fit to the mobile environment. They're going to have to potentially pinch and zoom out to get a sense of the whole page. So you can see this is unresponsive design. I'm sure many of you now are going, okay, I know what you're talking about. I experience it all the time, and it drives me insane. Okay, so what we did here is we tried to create a treatment that adjusted for this. So here's the responsive design. Now it impacts the desktop. You can see it kind of slightly, and I'll show you in a minute, you'll see it more clearly, but it did slightly impact the desktop design. You can see the impact it had on the tablet, right? So now the headline is wrapping. You get the images, everything you can see without having to really scroll on the tablet. And then now you can see even more effectively here how it was applied to the mobile design. Now the headline is definitely, all you've got to do is scroll up and down. Nothing is getting cut off. I want to show you these side by side. And I want to ask you right now, audience, using your marketing intuition, which often fails us, but in this case, we'll see. Which of these do you think will actually increase, which of these will have the greatest response? Let me ask you that right now. Responsive or unresponsive? I'm getting results coming in like crazy. Oh, responsive, 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 responsive. No difference, responsive to responsive. Is there anyone who's going to say unresponsive? Oh, I got one there. Let's see, what name is that? Stephen. No, that wasn't Stephen. That was Dan. Unresponsive. You little brave soul out there. Well, we will see here. So I want to reveal the results. And the results are responsive design in aggregate between the desktop, the tablet, and the mobile device increased conversion by 56%. 56%. So guys, in some sense, your intuition is right. In some sense, it does reduce friction. But guys, there's something underneath here that I want to show you that's even a bit kind of, I would say, surprising. Almost borderline shocking. That's the word I was thinking about using. But surprising at least. let me show you this. So when you break the results up, because what I just showed you, the 56% increase was on the aggregate level. That was combining the overall impact, the difference between the desktop, tablet, and mobile. My question to you is, which of these three things, the desktop, the tablet, or the mobile, did responsive design have the most impact? So I want you to tell me right now, which of these three things do you think the responsive design had the most impact? Mobile, mobile, tablet, mobile, 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 desktop, mobile, 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 mobile. Don't know. Well, thank you for your honesty. I appreciate that. Tablet, mobile. So the vast majority are saying the mobile, which makes a lot of sense. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to walk through today. What we're going to do is we're going to walk through each of those, and we're going to compare how much did responsive design impact the desktop, how much did it impact the tablet, how much did it impact the mobile. And we're going to kind of look, where did that aggregate increase come from? So we're going to start, to keep you guys on the edge of your seat, we're going to start with the desktop. Okay? We'll get to the mobile. Desktop performance. How did changing and making the design of this page responsive impact the desktop performance? I want to ask John Powell to come up here with me for a minute, because John Powell is very versed in this test. Come here, buddy. And you can go ahead to the clicker.
Thanks.
And like I said, John Powell here, he is you've been studying this test, you were involved in putting together these slides and everything that goes into this test. So I want you to walk us through here just the main changes that we saw in the desktop. So I kind of glossed over it, I went quickly. Walk us through in more detail kind of what changed and what things happened on the desktop version.
Sounds good, Austin. And everybody, the reason why we're doing this is this. If we're going to understand enough to make the next test, or to make the series of tests, or to actually use this and apply it to multiple sites or multiple flows, we've got to look at it in detail. So let's just look at the desktop. Now you got to keep in mind that when you change the code like this, it's going to impact. It's like a CMS, okay? It's content management system in a sense, right? Where you're filling in blanks and then you're letting something symbol them on the page for you. That's at least my understanding, my layman's understanding of it. So for the desktop control, this is what was in place, and this was a winning treatment from multiple treatments that they've been doing. Now, for most screen sizes, you can pretty much access just about anything that's primary, okay? Anything that you need to move. Some ancillary content, you're gonna have to scroll a little bit. But you've got this whole almost faux pop-up style. I say faux because it doesn't, I don't think it's an actual pop-up. I think it's designed to look like a pop-up, at least as I was playing with it and moving with it. So, but it has that feeling, okay?
So, and I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but you see those kind of the side columns there that have like, looks like something going on in the background? So you're saying that in the design, the original page had designed to make it feel like it was a pop-up on the page.
And that, if I'm correct, that was a winning treatment from a previous test.
Okay, excellent.
So they maintained that, and they just kept the control in place. Now, let's take a look at what version was produced with the new code. Like the control, all of your primary content is accessible. You don't really need to scroll much. I mean, your ancillary content, again, gotta scroll a bit. So it's very similar. But one thing to keep in mind is that as the code was produced and as it kind of produced a result, this page, it got rid of all of that pop-up. And I'm not sure if they tried really hard to do it. I haven't had thorough conversations with developers, but from what I understand, like a CMS, you're limited in some instances, at least with the time and resources you have. So this is what it produced.
But side by side, if you look at them, they're not that different. The main difference is you lose the pop-up, the faux pop-up kind of feel. Right,
and that is really kind of the significant difference that I'm seeing when I put it under a microscope, at least from the visitor's perspective.
So, audience, let me just ask you this. Before, John, we show the results, let me ask you this, audience. What do you think the difference, just on this piece alone, we talked about the aggregate result of that was a 56% increase. How much of an increase do you think this change on the desktop had? What percentage do you think it had?
If any. I mean, again.
Yeah, if any. Was it a negative increase? I mean, yeah, any. So I see 10%, 20%.
Decrease, even.
Yep, 0, none. Okay, John?
So here are the results when we examine the data. Oh my God, 105% relative increase in conversion, and those are free trial conversions, not clicks.
Now this is this is really, can you go back to those 2 pages side by side? So
Sure.
105% difference between this page and this page.
Right, and it begs me to ask a very serious question as a researcher, as somebody trying to learn from this, trying to figure out what to do next. What was it? Was it an error even?
Yep.
Was it an error in the data? Was there some kind of a effect that science has missed in their validity and certification process?
Yep. And so, you know, the other thing this reveals, the 105% increase reveals that our next 2 things that we're going to be walking through, one of them is potentially not going to increase conversion. And so we're going to be looking at that's kind of, I mean, to me it builds a little bit kind of excitement. I'm excited to go see how the tablet performed at this point. So good question. How did, you know, why did it cause that? I think we'll get to that. I want to look at how the tablet performed.
Right.
So go and walk us through that.
So let's go and take a look at the tablet. Now we've included, and just to let you know, Android devices were included in the test.
Excellent.
Right, we're just going to take a quick look. Now what you've seen is actually one of few popular Android devices, a Kindle Fire, and then you've got you know, an iPad, one of the later ones. In iOS, when you look at it from a tablet perspective, you notice that the majority of the content is really just like with the desktop. It's accessible without action. Okay, but if you take you got to scroll for the headline, you've got to scroll for the image, but just about everything you need other than that image is available to make a decision. Another thing is, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but if you look at the very bottom of the iOS image, you see that faux kind
still
of
a little of the faux pop-up.
So I mean, so you would actually be able to scroll down or whatever and see a little bit of that. So it's just something to note. For Android, all of the content is accessible, but you're going to need to resume, save the supporting imagery. And one thing that was really odd, and I had to use multiple devices just to ensure that this was the case, is that the gray X and everything is rendering that way on the device.
Interesting.
So I just seemed a little strange to me.
Yep.
So anyhow, let's take a look at
So it's how the responsive design.
the responsive, or you know, how the code did. Now if you take a look at iOS, the supporting image is immediately visible. So it's there to help them kind of make their decision depending on the emotional value of it, right? And the background is completely eliminated. So it looks like a single page, right? And then if you take a look at the Android version, a significant improvement in the aesthetic and page load. I mean, this is like night and day to me, at least, right?
In the Android version.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, the image is still lost, okay?
Yes.
But really, if you think about it, oops, I'm sorry. Let's go back one. There we go. The image is lost, but even so, it's a significant improvement, at least from what I need to see and what I need to see to make a decision on the Android
Let's
device.
look at them side by side, because to me, oh yeah, big difference in the Android design. The iOS design is, you get the image back, you see the headline wrapping.
And one thing I do want to point out as well is because in the 2 iOS devices, here's the other slight thing. You see that no thanks button? That's in place of the X that you would have to push in order to, in the little text link that you would have to push in order to get out. That's really the only difference there.
So audience, let me ask you this. We just saw an experiment with a desktop where slight changes had a drastic result. I want to ask you right now, just using your intuition, do you think that moving from unresponsive to responsive design on the tablet thing will actually improve conversion? And if so, by how much? What do you guys think? What do you see there? I see a 50% decrease.
Improve 45%, I see a 40%.
Yes, improve 75%. So I see a lot of improve. So yeah, we had a small change on the desktop that had improvements, so the majority audience seems to be thinking that we will also have a decent improvement here as well. So John, without further ado.
So here are the results.
Ooh.
No, and when I say significant, no significant difference in conversion statistically. So you'll see 21%, but if I were to look at it from a scientific perspective, I wouldn't be able to take it seriously.
Just, I mean, literally in like 2 sentences, just explain what you mean by significant, so the audience is just clear on that.
So this is better left for a scientist person, but my layman's version of it is very much, we run calculations and formulas to determine if we were to do this however many times over again, that we would get the same results, except in maybe 5% of the instances. So there's like a threshold. So
we want, in some sense, we're looking for our tests are at least validated at a 95% level of statistical confidence. And so the fact that it's not significant means that we are under that threshold.
Right.
So
this could be random chance for that matter. This difference. It could be under, could be over, but that's how it landed at the time that this test was run.
Yep. The difference isn't great enough to actually say this page is statistically better than this
Right.
page.
It's different. It doesn't. There's not enough really difference to do that.
Yeah. So that's pretty shocking there, John. And so let's ask the question here: why did the same treatments perform differently on different devices?
Meaning just the desktop versus the tablet. I mean, is this the same content, guys? I mean, there's very little, they had to make some tweaks to accommodate the tablet because they didn't have that big X. They weren't doing the faux pop-up, but really it's the same exact content, like a CMS.
Yeah, and guys, the reason we're putting these questions on the screen is because we're wanting to take you through the journey that kind of a marketing scientist goes through. So this is the question that you're going to ask. You're going to have a significant test. You're going to ask the question, why? And here's the thing. You can learn from a non-significant test. We're going to learn today from it. So now here's the thing that I want to see. We've got 10 minutes left. I want to see the mobile performance.
Right, me
so
too.
we saw a big lift in the desktop. We didn't see anything in the tablet. The mobile seemed to have the greatest change. Let's see what the mobile design. Well, let me ask the audience. Audience, you ready to see the mobile design? Is our pace okay? Do you guys, do we go faster? Do we go slower? Is it making sense? Okay, it looks like the audience is about to storm the studio here to see the mobile. So, all right, so let's go ahead and go mobile performance. What happened with the mobile performance with responsive design?
Well, let's take a look. So we've got an Android device here, and we have an iOS, so kind of a Samsung popular device. And this is how it rendered on the two different ones. So on the iOS version, you're going to need a lot of scrolling, as you can remember, just to make a decision, just to understand the sentences. You're going to have to go back and forth, up and down.
Yep.
And when you take...
The Android is awful.
Yeah, you've got that same kind of gray X, which is really weird. Again, multiple devices. There's some similar rendering issue here. You got to pinch to zoom a couple of times, and when you zoom in, you may have to... It's going to be some trial and error with the fingers. I mean, and you lose the image, of course. The rendering too kind of, I don't know, for me, it just kind of kills some of the credibility, but that's just me.
Yep.
So
how does it look in the responsive design?
So when we take this different approach in which we adapt kind of the content across different devices here, if you can see a very extremely consistent experience from an Android device and an iOS device. They're both going to require some scrolling, but I mean it's clear. Free trial offer.
No scrolling though, it's just up and down, right?
Right, headline. And there doesn't look like need a supporting image here, but it's very clear what it is that you're giving me, what I have to do, and then the only thing I need to discover is, okay, do I click something? How many fields? Things like that.
All right, show them side by side.
So let's take a look side by side.
All right, audience. Here's your final shot. Okay. This is we'll see what this one's going to result in. So we got unresponsive design on the left and responsive on the right. So far, the greatest change that we've seen in terms of the two designs or the responsive designs. How much do you think this will impact conversion? Do you think it'll have a positive impact? Do you think it will have a negative impact? If it has a positive, by how much? 400%, 150%, 35%. I see a negative 25%. 65% and up. What do you see?
Boom, 250% increase. I like that. Boom,
so we're all in favor of this. And if honestly, if we could have a drum in the studio, we might have a drum roll right now. So John, what were the results of just looking at the mobile device?
I hate to disappoint you, but we didn't see a difference. And this is one of those cases where it actually ended up on the negative side of the two. Now, again, I wouldn't take that seriously.
So this isn't a negative result.
Not to me.
This is a insignificant difference.
I don't have enough difference to make a decision one way or the other. So I don't think it's hurting me, but I don't think it's helping me either.
Right. So if you go back to the aggregate result that we had at the very beginning, it was mostly attributed to the desktop, the success of the desktop, which is absolutely counterintuitive, because not only was there not a significant difference there, but you saw the most difference in the mobile design.
Right, and honestly, audience, this confused the heck out of me, to be frank.
Yep.
You would wonder that something significant like this, I guess from a friction perspective, right? Especially the Android devices,
mm-hmm.
right? You would think that that would make a huge difference, right? And I look at this and I'm like scratching my head. I'm like, well, what's going on?
Yep.
Why?
So John, from your conversation with the researchers and the analysts and the way you've been thinking through this, because
right.
I think everyone on the online, and actually audience, I want you right now, become the scientist, propose, why do you think? I remember, go back to that first question, that first kind of setup we had at the beginning about friction. Why did this not have the impact on friction that we were thinking? And so, John, I want to, as they're doing that, John, I want you to walk us through the next 2 slides and explain to the audience what we are hypothesizing for why we saw the results that we did with this page.
Right. So let's go ahead and take a look. So here's the thing. The mobile and the tablet treatments, you cannot deny that they made significant changes. I mean, there's a very consistent experience here across devices. I see enough information to make a decision, but it makes me wonder how much impact did it really have on the mind of the customer. So, but take a look at the desktop. When we look at the desktop, something else is happening here. Think about the customer and their mindset. Think about psychologically. If you're on a publishing site nowadays, and I worked in publishing 7 or 8 years ago when they were starting to do this website stuff, oh my gosh, you can't get to an article without going through 3 ads or 4 ads, and you just go click, click, you're like, oh my gosh, click, oh my. You get almost upset in the sense that you're being sold and that something's getting in the way. And I'm wondering, I'm hypothesizing, did that change here in which they actually felt like they were getting something, it wasn't like this pop-up, did they knee-jerk categorize it as something that was a waste of their time? And for that group of people, did they act differently now that they saw that it was a full page?
There's a degree of anxiety associated with pop-ups. In our other testing, previous testing that we've seen, pop-ups are generally associated with sales, and that's what you're saying. And perhaps, I'm just trying to reiterate to you so the audience and I get it, perhaps the fact that it actually felt like a pop-up was creating this anxiety and this fear that it's actually like a sales tactic on me. And perhaps by doing the responsive design on the desktop, kind of coincidentally, like we decreased the anxiety.
Right, and this is a subconscious thing. I mean, they study this in psychology. We judge things just in an instant, just so that we could survive, so we know how to, do we move, do we not move? And if we're trying to get somewhere fast to some kind of article or something, some people just don't want to fool around and they just get so upset. I'm one of those.
Excellent. Well, John, thank you so much, man. Very interesting experimentation. I know the audience enjoyed that. I hope you got something. I want to go through just some kind of summary principles here. Before I do, I want to ask you, okay, so this, I'm again, trying to take you through that journey of the scientist. Your next question that you have to answer as a marketing scientist is, okay, so what are you going to test next? I mean, looking at what we did on this page, we didn't impact friction as much as we had liked to with responsive design. We're not going to throw responsive design out the window. You don't do that with one test. This is just helping us get to a conclusion as to, just one experimentation. So looking at this, what would you test next? How might you redesign the responsive design in such a way to reduce friction even more? I want to see your responses coming through. In fact, I'm going to be taking your responses and we're going to be trying to let that even influence what we test next, and perhaps in the near future we might even show you something that is created, a test design from your feedback. So let us know what you would actually like to see test next in the responsive design, the execution of the responsive design of this page. So with that, I want to close with just some key principles. Some of this will just kind of tie everything back together, and this is really answering the question we asked at the very beginning. Is responsive design worth the investment? And here's the principle, guys. Here's what you need to see. It's more than us just saying, hey, yeah, it works on the desktop, and no, it doesn't work on the mobile device. It's the principle underneath this is much more foundational and much more important, right? So responsive design, and we got to be careful here because it's a hot topic. Responsive design, like any technology or technique, doesn't necessarily increase conversion. No technology, no technique, no rule necessarily just increases conversion. It's because we're not optimizing design, guys. whether it's responsive or not, we're not optimizing, we're optimizing thought sequences. What increases conversion? Like if we want to see responsive design be effective, it will only be as effective as it is changing the customer's mind, as it is impacting the thoughts of the customer. And so as John was walking us through, this requires us as marketers to put ourselves in the customer's shoes. It requires us to really, in some sense, become the customer, put on the eyes of the customer, get in the flesh of the customer and experience our mobile devices. Some of your pages might benefit from responsive design, some of them may not. And it really depends on the customer experience, how they're perceiving two things. First, friction. How much will responsive design actually decrease? This is a question to ask. How much will it decrease the perceived effort? And then second, and this is kind of, I wasn't expecting this, but our test kind of showed this. How much will also decrease the perceived concern? You may actually be able to, see, responsive design doesn't just connect to friction, it's more than that, it connects to anxiety. And so as you're considering it, really the answer to the question, is it worth the investment? The answer to that question is how much is it going to impact the perceived effort and the perceived concern? Because where it impacts it greatly, it's worth it. Where it's not, it may not be worth it. And so you as the marketer, don't just look for the silver bullet answer. Put yourself in the mind of the customer, in the eyes of the customer, and experience the page, and experience the friction, experience the anxiety. So that's the key principle for this. I am out of time. They are changing slides on me without me even clicking. So what I want to show you here right now is we have a, I've got a promotion here for you. It's for the email summit. You can see it on the screen. Essentially, you can save $200 on your tickets right now. If you like this experiment, we're going to be showing a lot of case studies from the top of marketers from around the world. On email marketing. The best marketers in the world are going to be showing you kind of things and tactics that they've done with email marketing, and I've already been switched off of it. They are moving me fast. We're out of time. Obviously, someone has a dinner date after this webinar. But here's the thing. Check out that promo code. We'll be tweeting it to you. We'll be sending it to you. You will get a replay of these slides. All the stuff you'll have sent to you. You can have that, use it. There's the promo code right there. Show it to them one more time. There you go, guys. All right. Now the moment that many of you are waiting, what are we going to reveal next? Like I said, the entire series of these webinars are to discover what works. And so we take the questions that we get from you. Does responsive design work? Does brand matter? Does content marketing work? Those kinds of questions. And we ask them, we test them, and we come and give you them answers. So here's the next question we have for you. It was working with a technology group, and here's the question. How many page columns should your website have? Oh my, I can't tell you how many times I get this question when I'm teaching. All right, so is it one column? Should it have two columns? Should it have three columns? That's the question. I think we'll be doing a meta-analysis of our entire research library to help answer this question for you, not just one test. But here's an experiment I want you to look at. Here's the control, 2 columns. Here's the treatment, reduced to 1 column. And I want to ask you right now, which of these do you think will win? Which of these do you think will have the greatest impact on conversion? Let me know right now. 1 column or 2 column? I see a lot of 1 columns, 1 columns, 1 columns, 2 columns, 2 columns, 1 column, a lot of 1 columns. I see your answers coming through. Excellent, excellent. Well, here's the answer, guys. You're going to have to wait till 2 weeks. 2 weeks, we will reveal the answer of this test, 1 column versus 2 column. That is just one experiment. We're going to be walking through. We're going to test multiple numbers of columns and to really try to answer the question, how many columns should your web page have? You can go to the link on the screen right now and sign up so you don't miss it. I would encourage you to do that right now, marketingexperiments.com/columns. Go there, sign up, make sure you don't miss that web clinic. Guys, I have gone over. I apologize to you there for that, but thank you for your patience. Thanks for your engagement. This was a fun webinar today. If you like this webinar, you like the format, please let us know. If you have suggestions for an improvement, how we can make this even more effective and to serve you better, let us know. Our entire effort here is to try to build a community of marketers that are trying to discover what works through scientific testing. So help us, help you, give us feedback. You'll have a survey that you'll be given after I end here today. There you'll have an opportunity to kind of put in feedback. Also right now using your GoToMeeting, you can let us know, did you find this clinic valuable? Do you have more questions? What would you like us to test next? Well, thank you very much. Again, if you enjoyed this webinar, I just encourage you to do one thing. We make these free of charge. It didn't cost anyone on this webinar to attend. We just ask you to, if you liked it, to tell a friend. All right, we'll see you back here in 2 weeks.